In this video I'm going to be talking about pseudo classes. Pseudo itself means false, unreal or fake. Not real in this context means not a DOM object, but instead a virtual element created for styling purposes. A pseudo class is used to define a special state. For instance, an anchor tag, that is an A tag, can have a state like unvisited, visited, hover, active or focus. What I really need to do is show some examples so you can see what I mean. So let's get started. I have my usual setup where I have an HTML file and I have a separate style sheet, and I have it linked in via this link here and an href attribute that goes to the styles.css. And I have a script element as well with an src attribute, short for source, with script.js, which is the script.js file here. But we probably won't be using that for this video. I'm going to start with pseudo classes for the anchor tag. I'm going to create two anchor tags. Don't have an href, and then br https www.google.com and do have an href. By default, the anchor tag without any href is not styled, but the anchor tag with an href is coloured purple and has an underline. Purple is the default for a visited site, and it's behaving like it's visited because I was playing with it earlier. If I set the href to something else, it will go to blue. c.co.uk. Save that. Now it's blue because I have not visited this site. I'm going to go to the styles.css and create a pseudo class for an unvisited link. And then then you do a single colon for a pseudo class, and then link. Color red. Note that only the tag with the href is affected by this. The one without an href is not affected. If I make this just A, now they both are affected. They're both coloured red. I'll put it back to a link. And that is the difference between a link and the A. The A link only affects the anchor tags with an href. Okay, I'll delete this link because we only want the one. And now I'm going to create a hover pseudo class. A hover, and the color is green. So now when I hover over it, it turns to green. I can have a pseudo class for the active state. The active state is the time when it is being clicked. this is a very short period. For this I'm going to change the background colour and the text to make it more clear. So a:\active colour is white and background colour is black. So now when I click on it, it changes briefly. Did you see that? The next pseudo class I'm going to create is the visited one. a:\visited, and then I'm going to make this color blue. So now it's turned blue because it's already been visited. The next pseudo class is the focus pseudo class. An element gets focus when you click to it or tap to it. I'll create a:\focus. I make it color orange. So if I click on it, it briefly turns to orange. What I can do is go to index.html and I can make this target equals underscore blank. And this will make it open in a new tab. Go like that. Still does it briefly, but when I look at it now you can see it. It's got focus, and if I tab away, it goes. Keep going till it gets tab again, and then it gets focus. But it also gets this outline as well. I can do outline none, and then don't get the outline. One thing that people often do is have the hover and the focused together. So instead of this, you'll have a hover and a comma a focus. So now when it hovers, nothing happens because it's overridden by a visited pseudo class. I'll come back to this problem later in the video. For now, I'll just comment this out. And now, if I hover over it, it turns green. And also if I tab to it, it turns green, except it has that outline none. There, turns green now when I tab to it. Another variation of the pseudo class type is a functional pseudo class. These function calls take in parameters which are a selector list. I'm going to create a container with two header tags in it. So dot container, and then h1. This is an h1, h2. This is an h2. Now go back to styles, and then The way you'd normally style it is dot container h1, comma, dot container h2, color red, and both of them turn red. But what I could do is use an is function. Like so. Go dot container colon is h1 h2 color purple, and they've turned purple. So it does the same thing, it's just shorter, but there's more interesting things you can do with larger examples. A very similar function to the is the where function. To understand the difference between is and where, you have to understand specificity. So I'll leave is and where for now to explain specificity. Here is a diagram showing CSS specificity. In this table you have 4 columns. The leftmost column has the highest specificity and it is coloured red. The next column is the ID column. This is coloured green and it has less specificity than the style attribute, but more specificity than the class and pseudo class attribute. The next column is the blue column, which is a class and pseudo attribute class, and this has a higher specificity than the elements but less specificity than the ID. And lastly you have the elements, which is the least specificity. So on the left side here we have examples, and the examples are color coded in the same way as these are color coded. So for the elements there's 1, 2, 3 brown elements, that's 3 here, and then you have an ID, one ID and one pseudo class, so you've got 1, 1, 3. Here body, then dot col class, and then another 2 elements, so you've got 3 elements and 1 class, so it's 1, 3, 3. And then this one is one ID, and then it has a not pseudo class. The not pseudo class is just inverts whatever it is. So instead of selecting the nav, it's everything but the nav. So this means everything but the nav, and then the list item. So you have one ID, a nav and an li. The other thing about the not is it's a special class, an exception to the rule, and it has a specificity of 0. So there's 2 elements and 1 ID for this one, and this is in the HTML, so the style attributes actually go in the HTML, and it's just one of them, and it's 0 for everything else. And then this one is all elements, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 elements, and first letter is a pseudo element, and that has a specificity of 001. So pseudo elements, unlike pseudo classes, are treated as elements. Right, back to our code. The is functional pseudo class and the where functional pseudo class work the same, but is takes as its specificity the most significant value of its list selectors and uses that as the specificity value, whereas the where functional pseudo class is always 0. An example will help you understand this. So if I create article colon where h1 comma h2 and h3 and make it background color pink, and then if I mouse over this, it tells me the specificity of it, which is 0, 0, 1. Article is an element, so that counts as the 1. The where evaluates to nothing, so you have 0, 0, 1. So there's no IDs and no classes or pseudo classes. If I create it without is or where, it'll be like the following: article h1 article h2 and article h3, background color is pink. And if I mouse over this, it's the selector specificity is 2, so it's 0, no IDs, no classes or pseudo classes, and 2 elements, because these are counted as a pair: 2 elements, another 2 elements, and another 2 elements. So you just have 2 elements. If I do it with a is, I can copy this, Control, and change this to is. Then if I mouse over that, the specificity is 2. Because the pseudo class function takes the most significant value of the selectors that are passed to it, and in this case they are all elements, so it evaluates to 1 element, and then you add that to the article element and you have 2 elements. So you have 2 elements, no IDs, no classes. So you may be wondering what the use case is for having both is and where. Well, having both can be useful if you have competing selectors. You may make one priority over the other, making the one you want to give higher priority to give a higher specificity. As an example, you remember I commented out visited because it overrode hover and focus. At the moment you can get focus and it turns to green, and if I tab to it, it goes to green as well. But if I uncomment visited, save that, it goes blue and nothing happens when I hover, and I can't focus to it. So what I can do is I can put in where here. First of all, I'll show you the specificity. It's 011. So you have the pseudo class of 1 and the element of 1. So if I make this where, and this colon visited, the specificity goes down to 001. If I save that, and now if I hover over it, it hovers, and if I tab to it, it turns green as well. The last pseudo class functional selector I'm going to talk about is the has function. It's essentially a parent selector, although far more useful than just that. For example, imagine being able to select all the divs, but only when they contain a p tag. You can do that like this. Div colon has p. When say background color is red. Then in index, I'll create a div, and here I'll put a h1. I'll just put h1 in there, and then below it I'll create another div with a p, and let's put p tag. So only the p tag is red. But if I put an h1 in here, h1, now the h1 is red as well, because it checks if there's a p tag, and then if it has a p tag, everything inside the div gets changed the background red. I think that's enough for this video. Thanks for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this video. If so, please subscribe for more.